The stars looked different from the bridge of the HFY Defender as it moved through the outer rim of known space. Captain Jake Morrison stood watching the endless void through the main screen while his crew ran their daily checks. The year 2387 had brought many changes to humanity's place in the galaxy, but Jake still remembered when Earth was just another world trying to find its way among the stars. The Galactic Commonwealth had accepted humanity as members 15 years ago, though. Most alien species still saw them as newcomers. The Meridian Consortium controlled most of the trade routes, while the hegemony managed the bureaucracy that kept thousands of worlds working together. Humanity sat somewhere in the middle with decent technology and a growing fleet, but nothing that made the major powers take much notice. Jake was reviewing patrol reports when the communication system came alive with an urgent signal. The voice that came through was soft and musical, but filled with fear that needed no translation. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez at the tactical station looked up from her screens with concern written across her face. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the Zalari homeworld," she said while working to clean up the signal. "It's coming through on all emergency frequencies." The main screen shifted to show a blue-green world that looked peaceful from orbit. Kepler 442b was home to the Zalari, people who had joined the Commonwealth 50 years ago. They were an aquatic species known throughout the galaxy for their medical advances and their complete dedication to peaceful living. Jake had met a few Zalari diplomats and found them to be gentle beings who seemed incapable of violence. "Put the message through," Jake ordered as the bridge crew gathered around to listen. The voice that filled the bridge belonged to someone speaking in careful galactic standard. "This is Prime Minister Kalara of the Zalari people. We send this message to all Commonwealth vessels in hope that someone will hear our plea. The Vorthic Empire has sent scouts to our system. Our sensors show a massive fleet gathering 3 systems away. We have no weapons and no way to defend ourselves. The Vorthak are coming to destroy our world and enslave our people. We formally request protection under the Commonwealth Mutual Defense Accords. Please help us." The message ended and the bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about the Vorthic Empire and their reputation for conquest. They were insectoid creatures who swept through systems like a plague, consuming everything useful and leaving dead worlds behind. Their technology was older than most species, but they made up for it with numbers and complete ruthlessness. "Rodriguez, what do we know about Vorthak military capabilities?" Jake asked while studying the tactical display. "They use swarm tactics, sir," she replied while pulling up files on her screen. "Hundreds of smaller ships working together to overwhelm. Defenses, their weapons are mostly kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams. Nothing too advanced but effective when you have enough ships." Jake nodded while considering their options. The Defender was a good ship with a crew he trusted, but it was built for exploration, not battle. Still, the Commonwealth treaties were clear about helping member species under threat. "Communications get me Ambassador Lisa Clark on Earth," he said. Priority channel. It took several minutes to establish the connection across the vast distances of space. When Ambassador Clark's face appeared on the screen, she looked tired from dealing with the endless diplomatic meetings that kept the Commonwealth functioning. "Captain Morrison, what can I do for you?" she asked, while clearly hoping this was not another crisis. "Ambassador, we've received a formal request for protection from the Zalari homeworld. The Vorthic Empire is preparing to invade their system. They're asking for help under the Defense Accords." Clark's expression grew serious as she processed this information. "The Vorthic Empire is a major power, Captain. This isn't something we can handle with a single patrol ship. I'll need to bring this to the Colonial Council immediately." "What about the other Commonwealth powers?" Jake asked. "Surely the Meridian Consortium or the hegemony will respond to a formal request." Clark shook her head slowly. "The Consortium only cares about trade routes, and the Zalari system has nothing they want. The hegemony will spend months in committee, debating whether to act. By then, the Zalari will be extinct." Jake felt anger building in his chest. The Commonwealth claimed to protect all member species, but when it came time to act, everyone found excuses. "So we're just going to let them die?" "I didn't say that, Captain. Clark replied with a steel in her voice that Jake had rarely heard. I said I'm taking this to the Colonial Council. Humanity has never abandoned an ally, and we're not starting now. The connection ended and Jake turned back to his crew. They had all heard the conversation and he could see the same anger in their faces that he felt. The Zilari were good people who had never hurt anyone. They deserved better than to die, while the galaxy's powers argued over politics. Set course for the Zilari system, he ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, that will put us in direct contact with Vorthak scouts, Rodriguez warned. We could be starting. A war Jake looked at the tactical display showing the peaceful world that would soon face destruction. Maybe it's time someone started one. The emergency session of the Human Colonial Council convened within 6 hours of Ambassador Clark's urgent request. Admiral Peter Collins sat at the head of the massive table in the council chambers on Earth while representatives from every human colony world appeared on screens around the room. The debate that followed would determine whether humanity would risk everything for a species most humans had never met. The Vorthic Empire has over 2,000 ships, said Governor Martin Webb from the Alpha Centauri colonies. We have maybe 300 vessels that could be called warships. This is suicide. The Zilari saved my daughter's life, replied Senator Diana Ross from the Mars settlements. Their medical technology cured a disease that would have killed her. We owe them everything, Admiral Collins watched the arguments flow back and forth while studying the tactical reports on his personal screen. The Vorthak were indeed a massive force, but their intelligence suggested weaknesses that others might not see. Their ships were old designs built for overwhelming primitive opponents through sheer numbers. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology or tactical thinking. What does our military assessment say? Asked President Kate Sullivan from her seat at the far end of the table. Her voice cut through the arguing voices like a blade and brought immediate silence to the room. Collins activated the main display, showing star charts and ship movements. The Vorthic rely on outdated tactics, Madam President. Mass formations using kinetic weapons and basic energy shields. They've never fought an opponent with modern targeting systems or a coordinated fleet. Tactics, that doesn't change the numbers, Admiral Governor Webb insisted. 2,000 ships against 300 is still impossible odds, only if we fight the way they expect us to fight, said a new voice from the back of the room. Colonel Ryan Hughes stepped forward from where he had been standing quietly against the wall. His uniform bore the decorations of the Proxima Centauri conflicts, where he had earned a reputation for impossible victories against superior forces. Colonel Hughes, you have something to add? President Sullivan asked while gesturing for him to approach the table. Hughes moved to the center of the room where everyone could see him clearly. I've spent the last 5 years studying Vorthak tactics and technology. They're not invincible, they're predictable. Every engagement follows the same pattern. Mass approach, overwhelming firepower, and complete destruction of the enemy. That sounds pretty effective to me, Governor Webb muttered. Against species that fight the same way, Hughes replied. But they've never faced an enemy that uses stealth. Technology coordination between multiple ship types or weapons that can penetrate their shields. They expect their enemies to line up and trade shots until the side with fewer ships loses. Collins nodded slowly as he began to understand what Hughes was suggesting. You're talking about asymmetric warfare, exactly, Admiral. We don't fight their fleet head-on. We fight the way humans have always fought when outnumbered. We use superior tactics, technology, and coordination to defeat a larger, but less flexible enemy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. President Sullivan leaned forward in her chair while studying the tactical displays. What would you need, Colonel? Full authorization for Operation Steel Shield, Hughes replied without hesitation. Deploy our most advanced ships with our best crews. Give them the experimental weapons from the Mars research facilities. Let them fight the way they're trained to fight. The experimental weapons haven't been fully tested, Admiral Collins warned. Plasma artillery and quantum torpedoes are still in development. Then we test them against the Vorthak, Hughes said with a grim smile. I'd rather risk untested weapons than let the Zalari die while we debate safety protocols, Senator Ross spoke, up from her position at the table. What about the other Commonwealth powers? Won't they object to us taking unilateral action? The Meridian Consortium has already declined to help, Ambassador Clark said from her screen. The hegemony is forming a committee to study the situation. By the time they reach a decision, the Zalari will be extinct. President Sullivan stood up and walked to the main display showing the Zalari homeworld. The Commonwealth was supposed to protect all member species. If the major powers won't act, then humanity will act alone. Madam President, this could start a war with the Vorthic Empire, Governor Webb warned. They might turn their attention to human space next. Colonel Hughes, what does our intelligence say about Vorthic expansion plans? Sullivan asked. Hughes activated his personal datapad and shared the information with the room. They're already moving toward human space. The Zalari system is just the next step in a campaign that will eventually reach our colonies. We can fight them now on our terms or wait for them to choose the time and place. The room erupted in new discussions as representatives realized the full scope of the threat. Admiral Collins stood up and activated the military communication system. General Sam Parker, report to the council chambers immediately. We have a war to plan. President Sullivan raised her hand for silence. I'm authorizing Operation Steel Shield. General Parker will have full authority to deploy whatever forces he deems necessary. The Zalari asked for protection and humanity will provide it, even if it means war with the Vorthic Empire, she continued while looking around the room at each representative. Even if it means standing alone against impossible odds. We keep our promises. The vote was unanimous. The UHS Warhammer dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system 3 months ahead of schedule. General Sam Parker stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought, watching the blue-green world of the Zalari appear on the main screen. Behind him stretched the most advanced fleet humanity had ever assembled, with 50 ships that represented the cutting edge of human military technology. Sir, we're detecting multiple Vorthac scout vessels throughout the system, reported Commander Amy Rodriguez, who had transferred from the Defender to serve as the fleet's tactical coordinator. They're positioned at all major hyperspace entry points, Parker nodded while studying the tactical display. The Vorthac had been busy during the 3 months since the Zalari's plea for help. Their scouts had mapped every approach to the system, and were clearly preparing for the arrival of their main invasion fleet. What they hadn't prepared for was the early arrival of human forces. Captain Morrison, report, Parker ordered into his communication system. Jake Morrison's voice came through clearly from the bridge of his newly upgraded vessel. So the Defender is tracking 12 enemy observation posts. They're using standard Vorthac sensor arrays, which means they can't detect our ships when we're running silent. Excellent, Parker replied while turning to address the fleet. Communication officer. Signal all ships to begin Operation Silent Thunder. Take out those observation posts before they can report our arrival. The human fleet spread out through the system, like hunters moving through a forest. Each ship had been equipped with the latest heat-dampening technology that made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The Vorthic scouts had no idea that death was approaching them from multiple directions. The UHS Ghost reached the first observation post within an hour. Lieutenant Commander Joe Martinez watched through his ship's sensors as the Vorthic vessel continued its routine patrol, completely unaware of the stealth frigate hovering just outside detection range. The enemy ship was typical of Vorthac design, with thick armor and multiple weapon ports, but outdated sensors that couldn't penetrate human stealth technology. Fire, Martinez ordered quietly. The Ghost railgun fired a single shot that punched through the enemy ship's hull like paper. The Vorthac vessel exploded in a brief flash of light before the wreckage tumbled toward the system's star. Throughout the system, similar scenes played out as human ships systematically eliminated every enemy observer. All observation posts destroyed, Sir, Rodriguez reported to General Parker. The Vorthic main fleet will be blind when they arrive, Parker smiled grimly while watching the tactical display update. Phase 2 begins now. I want defensive positions established on every major moon and asteroid in this system. When the Vorthek arrive, they're going to walk into the most comprehensive kill zone ever created. The Zalari government had been watching the human fleet's arrival with amazement. Prime Minister Kalara contacted the Warhammer directly to express her people's gratitude, but also their concern about the size of the human force. "General Parker, we are grateful beyond words for your help," she said through the communication system. "But we fear you have brought too few ships to face the Vorthek invasion fleet. Madam Prime Minister, we appreciate your concern," Parker replied while reviewing deployment orders. "But humans don't fight the way other species fight. We don't need to match their numbers. We just need to be smarter." Over the next several weeks, the human fleet transformed the Kepler 442 system into a fortress. The largest moon became a command center bristling with orbital defense platforms and sensor arrays. Asteroid belts were seeded with automated weapon systems and communication relays. Every approach to the Zalari homeworld was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Major Chris Thompson arrived with the first wave of mech units and began establishing forward bases on the outer planets. His mechanical warriors practiced combat operations in zero-gravity and hostile environments while preparing for the close-quarters fighting that would come when the Vorthek fleet arrived. "Sir, the enemy doesn't know we're here," Thompson reported to Parker during one of the daily briefings. "Our intelligence suggests they still believe this system is defended only by Zalari civilian vessels." Good, Parker replied while studying the latest reports from his reconnaissance teams. "Let them keep thinking that. When they arrive expecting an easy conquest, they'll find something very different." The Zalari watched these preparations with growing wonder. They had never seen a military force that moved with such precision and coordination. Every human ship seemed to know exactly where it needed to be and what it needed to do. The aliens began to understand that they hadn't just asked for protection from another species. They had asked for protection from predators. "General, we're receiving a message from the Vorthak fleet," Rodriguez announced during the morning briefing. "They're demanding we withdraw from Zalari space immediately." Parker read the message carefully before composing his response. The Vorthek commander had threatened to destroy any ships that interfered with their conquest of the system. It was exactly the kind of arrogant message he had expected from an enemy that had never faced serious resistance. "Send this reply," he told the communications officer. "You declared war on our friends. We're here to end it." The message was transmitted on all frequencies throughout the system. Within hours, it had been intercepted by listening posts throughout the galaxy. The Meridian Consortium quietly began preparing new trade agreements with humanity while the hegemony suddenly remembered several overlooked treaties with Earth. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity was no longer just another mid-tier species trying to find its place among the stars. They were something far more dangerous. The Vorthak battle group emerged from hyperspace exactly where General Parker had predicted they would appear. 200 ships materialized at the edge of the Kepler 442 system in the standard Vorthak formation, with their largest vessels at the center surrounded by swarms of smaller attack craft. Fleet Admiral Helen Carter watched from the bridge of the UHS Warhammer as the enemy force began its approach toward the Zalari homeworld. "Sir, they're using exactly the tactics our intelligence predicted," reported Commander Rodriguez from her position at the tactical station. "Mass formation advancing in a straight line toward the planet." Carter smiled while studying the enemy fleet through the main display. The Vorthak commander was following the same playbook that had worked against dozens of other species. Overwhelming force applied directly to the target with no consideration for tactics or strategy beyond simple intimidation. "All ships maintain silent running," she ordered through the fleet communication system. "Do not engage until they reach the asteroid belt." The human fleet remained hidden throughout the system, while the Vorthak force moved deeper into what they believed was undefended space. Their sensors showed only the peaceful Zalari vessels orbiting their homeworld exactly as expected. The enemy commander had no idea that 50 human warships were tracking his every movement. Captain Morrison positioned his upgraded defender behind a large asteroid where it could observe the approaching enemy fleet without being detected. His crew watched in silence as the massive Vorthik formation passed within weapons range, completely unaware of their presence. "Sir, I'm counting 47. Heavy cruisers and over 150 smaller vessels," reported Lieutenant Danny Brooks from the sensor station. "They're using standard Vorthik battle formations with no screening vessels or advanced scouts." Morrison nodded while recording the enemy movements for the fleet tactical database. The Vorthak were so confident in their superiority that they hadn't bothered with basic military precautions. They expected to sweep aside any resistance through sheer weight of numbers. "Captain, we're receiving the engagement signal from Admiral Carter," announced the communications officer. "All ships are cleared to attack." The Battle of Kepler's Gate began when the UHS Reaper materialized directly behind the Vorthek. Command. Ship. Lieutenant Commander Joe Martinez had used his stealth destroyer's advanced cloaking system to penetrate the enemy formation undetected. His ship's quantum torpedoes struck the enemy flagship before its crew even knew they were under attack. The explosion tore through the Vorthik command vessel and sent shockwaves through their entire fleet. Without their central command structure, the enemy ships began operating independently according to their basic programming. This was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. "All ships execute attack pattern Delta," Admiral Carter ordered. As the human fleet emerged from hiding positions throughout the system, the Vorthak found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Instead of lining up for a traditional battle, the human ships attacked in coordinated groups that struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Each human vessel knew exactly where its teammates were positioned and could coordinate their fire to overwhelm enemy defenses. The UHS Ghost and Phantom worked together to disable a Vorthak heavy cruiser by targeting its weapon systems with surgical precision. Their railguns punched through enemy armor at specific weak points identified by human intelligence analysts. Within minutes, the enemy vessel was drifting helplessly while its crew struggled to restore power. Major Thompson's mech units had been positioned on asteroids throughout the battle zone, waiting for their moment to strike. When the Vorthak ships came within range, his mechanical warriors launched themselves directly at the enemy vessels, using their personal thrusters to navigate through the chaos of battle. "So the enemy shields are useless against our boarding parties," Thompson reported to Admiral Carter while his units penetrated the hull of a Vorthak destroyer. "Their internal defenses are designed to fight other Vorthak not humans in powered armor." The sight of human soldiers fighting through enemy ships in zero gravity became a symbol of humanity's adaptability. The Vorthak had never faced opponents who could operate effectively in the vacuum of space or toxic atmospheres that would kill most organic beings. Their ship designs included no defenses against enemies who could survive in conditions that would destroy normal life forms. Captain Morrison led his squadron of heavy cruisers against the enemy's left flank while using advanced targeting systems to coordinate their fire. The human ships moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, with each vessel supporting the others in complex maneuvers that the Vorthak could not predict or counter. "Sir, enemy casualties are approaching 80%, Rodriguez reported as the battle entered its final phase. "Their remaining ships are trying to retreat, but our faster vessels are cutting off their escape routes." Admiral Carter watched the tactical display as the once mighty Vorthak fleet dissolved into scattered groups of damaged vessels. The enemy had learned too late that numbers alone could not overcome superior tactics and technology when wielded by opponents who understood the true nature of warfare. "Signal the surviving enemy ships," she ordered. "Tell them to surrender or be destroyed." The response came quickly from the few remaining Vorthak commanders. They had never faced defeat before, and the experience had shattered their confidence completely. One by one, the enemy vessels powered down their weapons and requested mercy. The battle was over in less than 4 hours. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment when humanity announced its arrival as a major military power. The emergency session in the Vorthak Imperial Palace lasted 3 days before Emperor Vorthak Prime reached his decision. The humiliating defeat at Kepler's Gate had shaken the entire empire and threatened to inspire rebellion among their conquered subjects. The Emperor's advisors argued endlessly about how a small human fleet had destroyed their battle group, but the conclusion was always the same. Humanity represented an existential threat to Vorthok dominance. Mobilize the entire reserve fleet, the Emperor commanded from his massive throne carved from the bones of extinct creatures. Every ship in the Empire will converge on the human position. These mammals must be crushed before they inspire others to resist us. The order went out across Vorthok space immediately. Over 1,000 ships began moving toward the Kepler 442 system from dozens of different star systems. The Emperor had committed every available vessel to this campaign, including ships that had been guarding critical supply lines and conquered worlds. Victory against the humans had become more important than maintaining the Empire's other territories. General Parker received the intelligence reports about the massive enemy fleet buildup with grim satisfaction. His network of human spies and electronic surveillance had been tracking Vorthok movements for weeks. The enemy was doing exactly what he had hoped they would do by committing everything to a single decisive battle. "Sir, the enemy fleet is larger than our original estimates," Commander Rodriguez reported during the morning briefing. "We're looking at over 1,000 vessels, including some ship types we've never seen before." Parker studied the tactical displays, showing the approaching enemy armada. The Vorthok had pulled ships from throughout their empire, including ancient dreadnoughts that had been mothballed for decades. It was an impressive show of force, but it also represented a critical weakness that human strategists had been counting on. "Request immediate reinforcements from Earth," he ordered. "Tell them we need the Terran war fleet and everything that comes with it." The response from the Human Colonial Council exceeded all expectations. President Sullivan authorized the deployment of the most powerful military force humanity had ever assembled. The massive UHS Titan departed Earth orbit along with 200 additional ships, including experimental vessels that had never been tested in combat. Admiral Collins arrived to take overall command of the expanded human fleet, bringing with him veterans from every major conflict in human history. The Outer Colony Wars had produced officers who understood how to fight against superior numbers, while the Mars Rebellion had created specialists in urban warfare and close-quarters combat. "General Parker, your initial strategy has worked perfectly," Collins said during their first meeting aboard the Titan. "The Vorthok have committed their entire fleet to this engagement. If we can defeat them here, their empire will collapse." The human fleet took up positions throughout the Kepler 442 system, with the massive Titan serving as the central command ship. The mobile fortress carried 10,000 troops along with weapon systems that could level entire continents. Its main guns alone were more powerful than most species' entire space fleets. Captain Morrison now commanded an entire squadron of heavy cruisers and had been promoted to Rear Admiral in recognition of his tactical expertise. His ships formed the outer screening force that would engage the enemy first, while the heavier vessels prepared for the main battle. "Sir, enemy scouts are reporting our fleet strength back to their command," Morrison reported to Admiral Collins. "They seem surprised by our numbers, but they're still advancing." Collins nodded while studying the tactical situation. The Vorthok were following their standard doctrine of massing their entire fleet for a direct assault. They had learned nothing from their previous defeat and were about to repeat the same mistakes on a much larger scale. The decisive engagement began in the outer asteroid belt, where the human fleet had prepared the most comprehensive kill zone in military history. The Vorthok fleet advanced in their traditional formation, with over 1,000 ships moving in a massive wedge toward the Zalari homeworld. "So the enemy is entering the engagement zone," Rodriguez announced as the first Vorthok ships crossed into the asteroid field. "All weapon systems are tracking multiple targets." Admiral Collins waited until the enemy fleet was fully committed before giving the order that would change galactic history. "All ships engage the enemy. Execute operation." Iron Tide, the human fleet emerged from hiding positions throughout the asteroid field, like ancient wolves emerging from a forest. Each ship knew exactly where it needed to be and what targets it should engage. The coordination was so precise that it seemed almost supernatural to observers watching from the Zellery homeworld. The Titan's main guns fired at 15% capacity and punched through enemy dreadnoughts like they were made of paper. The massive ship's weapons had been designed to crack planets, but against Vorthak vessels they were devastating beyond description. Major Thompson's mech units now numbered over 500 individual warriors, and they launched themselves directly at the enemy flagship. The sight of human soldiers in powered armor fighting through the corridors of the Vorthak command ship became a symbol of humanity's unstoppable nature. The battle's climax came when Colonel Hughes led a boarding party directly to the enemy throne room where Emperor Vorthak Prime commanded his fleet. The ancient ruler had never faced combat personally and was unprepared for the sight of a human warrior in full battle armor. "Your empire ends today," Hughes said before ending the emperor's life with a single shot. The remaining Vorthak fleet surrendered unconditionally within minutes. The aftermath of the Vorthak Empire's defeat sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy that would reshape interstellar politics for centuries to come. Admiral Collins stood on the observation deck of the UHS Titan watching as the last enemy vessels were processed by human boarding parties. The once mighty empire that had terrorized dozens of species for generations had been completely destroyed in a single engagement. Prime Minister Kalara of the Zelari people requested a formal meeting with the human command staff 3 days after the battle ended. She arrived aboard the Titan with a delegation of her finest medical researchers and engineers carrying data crystals that contained their most advanced technologies. "Admiral Collins, we owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid," she said while presenting the gift of Zelari medical knowledge to the human fleet commander. "Our people have voted unanimously to share all of our healing arts with Earth. The medical breakthroughs contained in the Zelari data banks were beyond anything human scientists had imagined possible. Genetic diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia could be cured with simple treatments, while aging itself became a manageable condition rather than an inevitable fate. Human lifespans would be extended by centuries while maintaining perfect health throughout those extended years." "Madame Prime Minister, this is far more than we expected," Admiral Collins replied while reviewing the scope of the medical data. "We came here to protect your people, not to gain rewards. That is exactly why you deserve these gifts," Kalara answered with the musical laugh that was characteristic of her species. "You risked everything for strangers and asked for nothing in return. Such generosity must be rewarded." The political changes began almost immediately as news of the human victory spread throughout the galaxy. The Meridian Consortium, which had refused to help the Zelari, now sent urgent messages proposing formal alliance agreements with Earth. Their trade representatives offered exclusive contracts and favorable terms for access to human-controlled space routes. "Admiral, we're receiving diplomatic requests from over 40 different species," reported Commander Rodriguez during the daily briefing session. "Everyone wants to establish formal relations with humanity." The hegemony bureaucrats who had spent months debating whether to help the Zelari suddenly discovered urgent reasons to grant Earth full membership in the Commonwealth Security Council. Documents that had been buried in committee for years were fast-tracked through the approval process with unprecedented speed. Admiral Collins was promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Space Forces and given authority to establish a new military doctrine based on the lessons learned during the Vorthak campaign. The Terran Protectorate became humanity's formal system for defending allied worlds with clear procedures for responding to threats against peaceful species. Captain Morrison received his promotion to Rear Admiral and took command of the new Exploration and Defense Command. His mission was to seek out other species that might need protection while gathering intelligence about potential threats to the growing human sphere of influence. "Sir, our long-range sensors have detected 17 different civilizations currently under threat from various aggressive species," Morrison reported during his first briefing as the new command's leader. "The galaxy has more predators than we initially realized, Major." Thompson's mech units became the foundation for an entirely new branch of human military service. the sight of human soldiers fighting effectively in zero-gravity toxic atmospheres and other hostile environments had impressed every species that witnessed their capabilities. The Mech Warfare Division grew rapidly as volunteers from across human space requested assignment to the elite units. General Parker, the Mech program has received over 10,000 applications this month alone, Thompson reported during a recruitment meeting. Every human colony wants to contribute personnel to the program. The transformation of Earth itself accelerated as news of the victory reached the home system. The planet that had once been just another world in the galaxy became the beating heart of an interstellar protectorate. Shipyards expanded to meet the demand for new vessels while research facilities worked around the clock to develop even more advanced technologies. President Sullivan addressed the Global Assembly 6 months after the Vorthak defeat with news that would reshape humanity's role in the galaxy. The advanced sensors installed throughout human space had been monitoring dozens of star systems, and the results were sobering. Representatives of humanity, we stand at a crossroads, she announced while displaying star charts showing threatened civilizations throughout the galaxy. Our victory over the Vorthak Empire has revealed the true scope of the challenges facing peaceful species everywhere. The assembly hall fell silent as the implications of her words became clear. Humanity had not simply won a single battle, but had taken on the responsibility of protecting an entire galaxy full of species that could not protect themselves. The Zelari asked us for protection, and we gave them something better, Sullivan continued, while looking out at the assembled representatives from every human world. We gave them victory. Now 17 other civilizations face the same choice the Zelari faced. They can die alone, or they can trust in humanity's promise. The vote to expand the Terran Protectorate was unanimous. Human fleets began departing Earth orbit within days, bound for distant stars where other peaceful species awaited salvation. Each ship carried the same message that had been broadcast during the Zelari crisis. Humanity keeps its promises. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about the species from the small blue world. They were not conquerors seeking to build an empire through force. They were protectors who would risk everything to defend those who could not defend themselves. Behind their advanced technology and superior tactics lay something far more dangerous than any weapon. They possessed an absolute refusal to abandon anyone who trusted them. The age of human protection had begun.